Mics, please.
Sounds good. Dave's also.
Okay, thank you. All right, welcome to our workshop. Today, Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024. We are privileged to hear from our Council of Government. Jesse Mott is going to be our staff engineer and give your presentation. Is that correct? We welcome all of you here and welcome to everyone that's here on the council. Okay, yes,
Okay, we're going to have Mayor Hidalgo's going to give a
Okay.
little something at the beginning to kick
Awesome.
us off, and then I'll walk you through the presentation.
Very good, thank you. Mayor.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank you for letting us come here this evening and give you a briefing on what we've been working on. My name is Craig Hidalgo. I'm Mayor of Clarkston and currently in my third year as chair of the COG. We've been working, since I started the chairmanship, we've been working on some ways to improve it. And last December, we went down to Weber and Davis County to see how they did their COG. I'd be the first to admit ours is just as good as theirs, but there's still some good opportunities that we have that we can improve our process and make it a little bit more data-driven in our decision-making process. So that's what Jesse's going to present tonight, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that.
Again, thank you for having us this evening. We kind of want to give an update on again, we know there's new council members that have come on, so a little bit of a review of kind of what the COG is, how it operates, and then a little bit of some of the proposed changes that we're looking at. Again, you'll remember that we have to come before this body every year for final approval, so we want to make sure that we kind of have the buy-off of the council now versus when we come in October. So we like to just make sure you're informed and aware of what we're kind of doing and where we're going. So again, just as a little bit of a reminder, in 2007, the Cache County voters approved a countywide 0.25% sales tax for transportation improvements within the county. And the ballot language read, shall Cache County, Utah be authorized to impose a 0.25% sales and use tax for transportation projects, corridor preservation, congestion mitigation, or to expand capacity for regionally significant transportation facilities. So since 2007, when that was passed, there's been roughly $65 million that's been collected through that sales tax. So with those $65 million, we've done roughly 50 projects throughout the county. So some of those are a couple $100,000 in some of the more rural communities to multi-million dollars, like the Logan Bridge over the river on 100 West. We put money on Wolfpack Way, Gateway Drive, 10th North project that's just starting now is another one that has a significant amount of COG funding. So we've seen a lot of good projects come from this sales tax that was approved, and again, it gives the county opportunity in a sense to be self-sufficient. We're not relying on the state or the federal government for money to make improvements to our transportation network within the county.
That is great.
And as well, stop me if you have questions. I want to make sure that if you have questions as we go, that we can answer them. And
I just have a real fast question. What are they putting in on 10th North and 2nd West? Is that a roundabout?
that will be a signal.
A signal.
At that
Awesome.
intersection. So
Yeah,
I think there's some
that's
turn
great.
lanes, there's a full-on signal, and then those improvements will go all the way till about the entrance of Petco on about 50
Great.
East. So UDOT required a little more improvements at that full intersection to widen it out on that side before it hits the west side of Main Street. So,
Okay,
but that
great.
should improve that corridor through there. A little bit about the COG organization. Once the sales tax was approved, the state code required a council of governments. So the council of governments consists of the 19 mayors within Cache County and the county executive. As part of the COG, we have a COG executive committee. There's a COG chair, who's Mayor Hidalgo, the mayor of Clarkston. We have a COG vice chair, that's Mayor Cox currently, and he's of Hyde Park. The chair and vice chair, they're nominated by the full COG, and they serve a one-year term, and they can serve more if they're renominated. And then as well, the county executive, Executive Zook, he also has a seat on that. As those tax funds come to the county, he is guaranteed a seat on that executive committee every year. To this point in time, the COG's only function is to administer and oversee a prioritization process and a recommendation to the county council for approval every year. So again, some other places the COG fulfills other responsibilities, but here their main focus is the transportation tax and overseeing it being dispersed to good projects. And then a little bit on the role of the county council and what kind of your role is. Again, all those funds come through Cache County, so there's kind of a stewardship and oversight of the local option sales tax fund. And as well, comes to you every year for consideration and approval as a one priority recommendation list from the COG. And again, we usually try to do that in October so that if there is an issue or we need to rework something, we still have time to come back to you, as we can only make one recommendation per calendar year for a new list of projects. So we try to give ourselves a little bit of a buffer at the end of the year. Kind of the role of the COG. We've worked to develop a weighted written project scoring system and prioritization process that the projects are run through to come up with our list. They ensure the process is transparent and fairly administrated. They create a yearly funding recommendation for your approval, and then they develop and administer other policies and procedures as needed. We have a policy manual that outlines how things work and stuff, so we kind of just have some consistency from year to year. And if there's questions, we say, well, what does the policy say? So there's a lot of time spent trying to make adjustments, and as we learn from year to year, we make little tweaks and try to make it better every time. So kind of how our current yearly process works. Each year we open for applications for different transportation projects. Then these projects come in and they're scored and ranked. There's 40% that of the points in the scoring is based on data-driven criteria. So we'll talk a little bit more about those a little later. And then there's also 60% of that criteria comes from the mayor and executive ranking those projects. There's some stuff you can't quantify, so that's where the mayors and the executive get to use their judgment of the network and the community to try to help rank the projects that is their funding the highest. Then the COG meets. Once all the scoring is done, they review that recommendation. They have the opportunity in a public meeting to make a change. If they rank one way and they don't feel that that's the best, then in a public meeting they can rearrange that as long as there's agreement among the full COG. And then again, we bring that recommendation to you, and usually we've been able to move that through here pretty quickly. I know, so we aim to try to hope that you can trust the process we've developed, and when we come to you, we've put the time and work in to try to give you the best list of projects.
I have a question. Yeah, the funding is for the following calendar year, but how soon, is there a deadline that they have to get that request in?
So right now we open the application process kind of in early May. About this time we say, hey, we're going to open it for this year. We kind of look at how much funding is available, and then usually their applications come in about August.
Okay.
So every year in August we kind of try to take applications, and that gives us a little time between August and we'll be coming to you in October to work through that review process. And then again, once they've been awarded and it's been approved by the county council, we work with a contract with all those communities in Cache County for the pass-through of those funds. And then currently those funds are available the next calendar year. And then once they've spent them and they can show that they've spent those on COG eligible items, then the county gives them a reimbursement for those costs. Currently, a little bit on how the COG funds work. Each month, the county receives a portion of those funds from the state tax commission. That's about $500,000 a month that comes in through that process, sometimes a little more. And then at time of new application round, the COG executive committee, they look at how much money we've received up to that point in about May, and they try to make a conservative estimate for the rest of the year. So they can say, hey, this year we're going to have $7 million. That kind of gives the cities an idea of what type of projects, how much to ask for. So we look at kind of what that is going forward. Once the contracts are executed at the end of the year, we usually have all that money has already been sitting in the bank. And then once those projects know that they've been awarded by the county, it typically they need some time to finish their designs. They work on right-of-way acquisition and then going out to bid and any other little things they have left. And sometimes projects can move through that very quickly, and sometimes, like the 10th North project's been working on right-of-way for like 4 or 5 years. So again, sometimes projects can move quickly and sometimes projects take a while, and that money just sits in the bank accounts of the county during that time. So again, and as those funds sit there, we're fighting inflation, we're fighting construction costs going up. So when those just sit, we're not being able to utilize fully those funds that have been put towards the transportation projects. This is kind of where now we want to talk about some of the changes that the COG's been working on and proposing, and this is kind of where we want to get some buy-off from this body. We kind of want to skip forward a couple years to 2026, and then we'll go back to the next 2 years just so we can look at how this process would work in the future. The idea would be that in 2026, we'd be awarding for projects 2 years in the future. So in 2026, we'd accept applications for funds that the county would receive in 2028. Then once they received their award and they knew that, hey, we have an idea that we've been awarded, that would give those projects roughly a year to finish their design, work on right-of-way acquisition, do anything else, and then be ready to go to construction in 2028. So kind of that 2 years later, with the idea that hopefully most of those projects would be able to be wrapped up in that 2-year window. And the goal of this new method is that we're not just sitting on lots of tax money in the county bank accounts. As that money comes in, we're able to put it straight to use and get the most out of that money, the money that we can. Again, sometimes big, more complex projects do take longer than just that year to prepare, but we're hoping that a good portion of those projects can move forward in that kind of this anticipated time frame, and those funds won't just be sitting. As we kind of look at the next 2 years of transition, where we're going to kind of be going to funding 2 years in the future, the anticipation for this school is that we'd award part of the 2024 money that we're receiving now, and then some of that's already in the bank, and the 2025 funds. And then next year, the projects as they submit and meet the requirements, then next year they could work on project design, the right-of-way acquisition. If there's some projects that are already ready to go, they wouldn't necessarily need to wait 2 years because we already have some of that money in the bank. So projects that are ready could go to construction next year, and then those that would need a little bit of additional time would ideally go to construction in 2026 and 2027. This same kind of process would work in 2025 with us awarding the 26 and 27 funds, and then we'd be on that kind of 2-year cycle going forward after that. It's estimated for this round and for construction for 2026, we'd award roughly $10 million. So that's a little more than usual. And then again, for that next following year, it'd be an estimated almost $18 million for these different transportation projects. So we've kind of weighted that a little more heavily for the future year because we don't want to just all of a sudden make way more money available without people knowing and everyone kind of just throwing different projects to see what sticks. We're hoping that by having kind of a more typical year this year and a larger year in the future, the cities will be able to have a little more time to prepare, figure out what the best projects are, get their plans prepared so that we can have the best projects ready when we're awarding that larger $18 million award.
Can I ask a question? We have the different cities and county submitting applications for a share of these funds. I mean, if they're looking at accepting project applications for 24 and 25, shouldn't they already have a pretty good feel for what the cost of that project is going to be and the plans already laid out as to what they're going to do?
So there are some projects where, again, where this has been going for so long, we usually have projects that are ready. So, and I know there's some cities that have their plans ready, they're ready to go and submit this year for application. So again, I think out of that money that we award this year, that will all be put into 2 projects. But with 2025, again, everyone's kind of, some projects takes longer to develop. So they'll be ahead in some projects within about that year. They can have that time to get those projects ready and lined up for that future award. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, the other question, follow-up to that is, we don't know exactly what the amount of funding will be in years going forward. And how do you deal with variations in what the amount available is?
Yeah, so as we've been able to track the sales tax revenue that we've had since 2007, every year we've seen an increase in that sales tax. So again, when we make an award in 2024, we would use, again, roughly we're getting almost $7 million a year in that sales tax revenue. So with the COG executive committees kind of assigned setting that award amount, they would use a conservative number. So again, usually we're doing that process now a little bit when we set our awards in May. So typically we're seeing $550,000, $560,000 a month coming in, and we say we're going to average $520,000. So we try to build a buffer in, knowing that is a possibility, that if something was to happen and we started to see that sales tax decline, when we talked to discuss if that did happen, we talked this is the pattern that Weber County follows, and they put within their contracts that right? This is the anticipated award. In the event that sales tax funds come in under budget or under anticipated, then that kind of, every project kind of takes a decrease in that percentage that's there. So the cities are kind of getting that guarantee, but there is that, again, if we started to see that fall, hopefully we'd be able to see it in time that we can let cities know, hey, you know what, it's looking like maybe we don't have as much money as we thought. But again, by kind of taking that conservative estimate as we award projects in the future, there's a little bit of extra money sitting there, and we hopefully can fund projects as they come through.
Thank you.
Yep. We'll touch on that in a second. So project funding shortfalls. Currently, if a project falls short in their funding, they either have to find those funds within their own budget, or they have to wait for another funding cycle to come back and ask for money from the COG. So we've had this happen a few times, and this results in delays in those projects because, hey, we need this much. Maybe as they finalize their designs or something happened, we saw a lot of inflation with COVID, increased construction costs, materials, and that slowed a few projects down. Or some cities like Logan, they have a little more ability to go into their funds and find some money to backfill that. Some of the other communities, it's a little tighter budgets, and they have to wait that following year. So again, that delays the project. That leaves those funds just sitting unused in the county's bank accounts when they could be using for projects. So as part of that, we're proposing an amendment process to help these projects that figure there's a shortfall. So in the event that a jurisdiction realizes, hey, you know what, we need a little more money, we miscalculated something, overlooked something, they'd be able to make a request back to receive those funds. This process would start with a request letter being sent to the COG Executive Committee. They'd review that, hey, you know what, we feel this is represented, we feel like this is a good use of money to give them more money. We don't feel like they're just trying to inflate the system or get more for nothing. And then that would also go to the full COG, which is the 19 mayors and the county executive. And then that would come back to this body for final approval. Anytime we're kind of giving more money, we want to make sure you're aware of that. Yeah.
So if you go back and you're trying to award 2 years in advance and somebody's short, haven't you already committed most of your money that's used?
No, that's the next slide. So you're right on. Then as part of this, those would be funded from a contingency fund. So there'd be a small portion of money that'll kind of be held in our recommendation to the county council.
So 7 million, you're not committing all 7 million.
So, yeah, you might save, again, this year where we're awarding more, our goal would be that of that 10 million, we'd likely put 3 million in a contingency fund, and we'd award the 7. So that way, as projects do come in, hey, you know what, we're short $500,000 or something, there's some money there, and then in future years, we kind of keep that filled with an ideal of trying to hold that contingency fund at approximately $3 million. So again, we don't want to have it be so much that we're just sitting on money that's not being able to be used, but we want to make sure that we kind of have a good cushion so that we can keep projects moving and we can keep them, we're not halting projects.
Is there, I don't want to use the word law, but is there a requirement on this tax that it's used within so many years of it being?
I don't think there's anything in the state code that ties to that.
Okay.
We kind of have some COG policies of, hey, we want to aim to use it in 6 years, but again, right now, we have some older projects, but there's roughly $20 million in COG funds that have been awarded to this date that haven't been spent. So again, we're starting to see that projects are taking a while, that by the time they get awarded to the time they go to construction. So by trying to give them an extra buffer, you say, hey, your money's coming, make sure you're ready when it's available. We're kind of hoping to cut that down from the 20 million to kind of a reserve fund in those projects that are going in that year.
That's part of the reason for this change, what we're doing, is to make sure that the municipalities understand, okay, we're gonna award this money 2 years out, 30% design right now, we want you at 100% by the time you get that money. So that it's not sitting there like it's doing right now, it's revolving out, it's going in and out.
Yeah, because that money's setting, though it is earning money, it's probably not keeping up to the cost of inflation and materials that's warping.
The inflation, the cost of materials and labor is starting to eat at a lot of this right now.
Right.
And this is a way to control some of that situation.
Again, right now, interest rates are high, but we know they're not always that way. So again, when they're kind of more normal, we do feel like we're losing money with it just sitting there over for so long in the bank account.
Do you find, and this probably is a little bit off tangent, but when you work with UDOT that you maximize your dollar, or how does that go? Because you've got 19 communities, 19 mayors. State road goes through a lot of those communities, but not through all of those communities. So does that make a difference in how you look at this, or you go back to your data to find those two steps as you're awarding that money?
So as we award that money, again, right now it's just based on the data-driven scoring and the mayors using their knowledge to assign those funds. So those are the two kind of breakups of how that score and that list is composed.
But this will force more of a look at those opportunities as well. That's one of the, as you get into this, you'll see where it's one of the ranking, where they get points, when they've done that.
Okay, makes sense.
So the other thing is sometimes as projects develop, we see some minor scope changes. Some examples of some of those are, there was a project like in Newton that took a road and widened out and paved it a little bit, and as they got their bids and they were well under budget, and they're like, hey, you know what, we've been awarded this, we want to go another 30 feet or something. So right now, those kind of minor scope changes have been approved by the COG Executive Committee. And late, the question's been, how are we defining a minor scope change? Is there a line in the sand we draw? Is there a percentage? Is there a dollar amount? So right now, it's being proposed that we set a minor scope change to 5% or less of the project award amount. So we're kind of saying, hey, you know what, if it's this much, then we're going to still leave that to the COG Executive Committee to make little tweaks here and there. You know what, something happened. Anything over that 5%, we would like to be able to push back through the full COG again, to the Executive Committee, to the full COG, and back to this body, so that, again, as you kind of oversee those, we bring a list of projects to you and say, hey, here's what they're doing, you're aware of those. We still feel like, hey, a little bit of tweaking here and there is appropriate, but if we're getting too much, we want to make sure this body's aware as they kind of hold that final oversight role of those funds. So it's kind of, we want to be more open, make sure you guys are aware of how the process is going and how projects are making changes. And then we've also been working on a few other little changes. One is the project prioritization, like our scoring rubric for the data-driven scoring. Before, we kind of had 3 criteria. We had safety, we had advanced corridor preservation, we had congestion. The advanced corridor preservation was one that didn't really get used a lot, so we kind of were really weighting those projects based on 2 criteria. As we've been working through we've been working with a lot of the staff from the different jurisdictions to revise that, and we'll be taking that to the mayors in our meeting that we have next week. We're looking at different criteria from volume to if it fills gaps in the network to if it includes an active transportation element to safety, and I think there's 2 other ones. So we're trying to make a more robust, hey, let's revisit this, let's get some buy-in from all the cities, from the mayors, and make sure we feel that we have a good criteria that kind of helps really distinguish and tries to bring the best projects to the top. That's really hard to do when you have such a wide variety of projects throughout the county. So again, sometimes it's hard to compare a project in a rural area to one in the urban area, but we try to do that, and we also have the rural set-aside that guarantees some of that money goes to those rural communities. So again, we're working on those revisions, and that makes up about 40% of that. And then we also, when the COG mayors do their vote, we have project presentations, we have a technical memo from COG staff that kind of, hey, here's maybe the strengths or weaknesses of some of those projects, and we also have a jurisdictional staff review comment log where we send it out to all the cities and kind of allow them to make comments on those plans. So we try to do what we can do as staff and as the cities to make sure that the mayors have as much information as they can when they rank those projects. So again, they can take in things that we can't put numbers to in the data-driven scoring and just, hey, I know this road's busy, or I know this is a safety issue, and allow them to use their judgment to carry a weight of that scoring for the overall projects. So again, kind of as we look forward with the path that we're going, again, you'll kind of we'll still come to you with that final recommendation each year for your approval, but there may be other times during the year when we come to this body for to consider funding amendments or scope changes. So again, we want to keep you involved in the process where these monies are going. So that's our goal, is to be able to come back to you, not just see us once a year, but hopefully not too often. We don't want to make, again, by pushing the funding amendments and the major scope changes having to go from the COG Executive Committee to the COG to the County Council. We don't want it to be that everyone's just lining up at the door to ask for more money. We kind of want to make it a process so that they have to say, you know what, it's worth our time, it's worth the effort to go through this process. We need those monies, or we really think this is a good scope change, not just trying to get more and more money if it's too simple. So we want to try to keep it somewhat complex, but enough that they can get the money when they need it. And that's all I have. Are there any other questions from the council?
I need a clarification, and maybe this is something that's way out there. When you have those projects and they're brought in, you know, let's say a little tiny community wants money, how are all of those weighted so that everybody gets a fair chance at the money they need?
Yeah, so right now, when all the projects come in, they get ranked by all the mayors, they go through the data-driven scoring, and we come up with a list of projects. And then we start at the top of the project list with how much money we have, and we start, this one ranked the highest, it gets X amount of money till we run out of money. Right now, we have what we call a rural set-aside, so that's based on, it's a split. Right now, it's about 13% of those funds that are guaranteed for the communities outside what's referred to as the urbanized area. So the urbanized area is roughly Smithfield down to Hiram out to Wellsville. So anything inside that's kind of that urbanized area, and anything outside of that's guaranteed 13% of those funds. So that percentage is based on the road mileage that UDOT calculates based on types of roads and stuff like that. So that helps kind of give that split and guarantee some of those funds to the rural communities. So again, each year, if one of those rural communities has a really good project and the mayors rank it really high, then it can take kind of what we call the area, any area money. So, hey, you know what, this city's Mendon's in with a really good project, A rank number 2, then it gets to take out of that big pot. It doesn't have to take from that 13%, but that just allows that there's always some money that goes to those smaller rural communities.
Thank you.
Do you only look at certain class of roads? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so within the urbanized area, the road needs to be a collector and arterial. So that's either based on UDOT's classification scheme that they have, and because UDOT doesn't have necessarily every road, if you're building a new road, it might not be on theirs. If that city has it classified on their transportation master plan as one of those, and it's to be built out that way, then it qualifies for meeting that requirement. So outside in the rural areas, as long as it's a city town road, then it qualifies for COG funds. So they can pretty much do anything they want in the rural communities, but within the urbanized area, it needs to be on one of those classifications of roads.
Well, I ask that because a lot of our citizens travel outside of the county for jobs, and sometimes they're using dirt roads as a quicker way to get to places. For instance, I know out in Newton area, as they go over into Nucor, in the south end of the valley, as Paradise residents go through into Brigham or whatever else, they're on some dirt roads. Do they ever get looked at, or it's only where we see the...
So where those roads, like the short divide, the long divide, where those fall outside the urbanized area, there's nothing that would stop those projects from receiving funding. And I think as well, even like, what's the Mount Pisgah road that runs across, I think that one is classified on UDOT's road for most of that as a collector, and I think it might fall outside the urbanized area as well. So it would qualify for, I believe it would qualify. Sometimes I have to look at a map to verify, but I think all those roads would be eligible for these funds.
And in addition to that, you know, these small communities like mine, and you talk about Paradise and stuff, and walk over there, you can attend UDOT's, they do twice a year conferences where they look at those type of roads. And like I've been doing, I've been going there pushing, let's get some short divide road, it's another arterial way out of the county. And it's taken me 6 years, but they're finally putting it on their maps,
Starting to listen?
So,
starting to listen.
Because there's a lot of travel through those in good weather and whatever else, which does lessen the impact on other roads too.
yeah, so, and again, as we talk about classifications, I know as well, UDOT's currently in the process of updating their classification map for Cache County at this point in time. So again, I know Jeff with the CMPO kind of made that pitch to the cities, hey, if you have roads that maybe need to be classified differently or things have changed, they're working on that process to try to make sure that the roads are classified correctly as UDOT has them, so.
So if you go back to your first slide, you talked about the classifications of,
Tell me which one you're,
That's what I was gonna say, if you go back to your one where you say what was approved for the COP funding, and you answer Nolan's question, a lot of those roads, Nolan, it's for corridor preservation, congestion mitigation, or to expand capacity.
corridor preservation is the one I was wanting to talk about, so.
A lot of those roads you were just mentioning out through South Canyon, short by those, they don't rank as high because they're not doing congestion mitigation, or they're not expanding capacity because there isn't that, there's a few hundred cars a day as opposed to thousands in the urban area.
So have you defined corridor for Cache County? Does that make sense?
as in,
Because we talk about West Corridor, we talk about other corridors. Do we have a map that says these are the corridors that we need to be cognizant of and planning for? And have we labeled those?
at this point, I know the CMPO has their regional transportation plan, so when we talk about the Western Arterial, that's one that's still, on the CMPO plan, it's still just a line on the map. So again, I think it was brought up in this meeting maybe before the county received those $2 million to continue that process, and that process will help define where that road will actually fall on the ground. So again, as some of those big roads advance and progress, and we start to say, hey, this is where it's gonna be, these funds could be used to start obtaining that right of way.
Well, that's why I bring it up, because if we know where a corridor is and you've got some funds sitting, you
These
could
funds would be,
buying some ground that would be used for that corridor expansion or something.
yeah, and these funds could definitely be, hey, you know what, we know this is where it's going, the city start putting some of this money to those corridors, that's definitely an option and a use of this fund. There's also, not to get on the other one, I think there's also is it the registration tax fee?
There's an additional local option that the county council would have, I think we talked about in the road meeting a little bit, which is to impose a vehicle registration fee. And while you're a third-class county, half of that could go to general road construction, but half would have to go to corridor preservation. When you become a second-class county, hopefully I said that right, when you become a second-class county, then all of that would have to go to corridor preservation. And that, if you were to pass that, would run through the COG similar to how this does. But that speaks to that wisdom of trying to get out in front and purchase land. One of the struggles though is these cities are so caught up in their immediate needs with roads, it's sort of hard to think, okay, this corridor, we need this in the future, 10 years down the road. It's hard to get them to pivot to apply for that because they're so desperate for other projects.
Well, along that same line, two questions then. So a registration fee, and Matt, and in that road committee, didn't we talk about another tax that could be applied for that too?
There's another, so this is one, the one that funds the COG is one of, they call a quarter, there's 5 quarters.
Yeah.
So there's different ones, the county's enacted some of those, there's other ones that could be enacted, some of that is some of those, the county council gets to decide how those funds are used. There's other ones that go through formula based on what that state code calls for that 0.25%.
Second question comes because we're seeing cities that have to do sewer or water line improvement or anything else. Does any of this go because they're tearing roads up and you can say, okay, now's a good time to widen them or better them?
So a lot of the time when projects come in, a lot of the times they try to connect, hey, you know, while we're there and we know the road's tore up, we're gonna use our own funds to improve the water, improve the sewer. So the COG doesn't pay for those improvements of their water and their sewer, but we do see a connection of that, trying to get the most bang for their bucks of, hey, if the COG's paying to do the road, we're gonna put some extra money into it to improve our utilities while it's already dug up. So I know Logan has some water going in on 10th North, the
You
Richmond.
look at Hiram and Millville and all the
So-
sewer stuff going on there and the tearing up of roads, so.
Yeah, so again, if some of those roads meet meet the requirements for this, so again, if they said, hey, you know what, this is a road, and even before, they came in to do the sewer, it already needed these improvements, hey, we wanna put in an application to build that road out, then there's nothing that would stop that, so.
Okay.
I have a request. Last year, we went to the Building Utah conference, which was mostly about roads, and a lot of things, I was good information, but things I wasn't familiar with enough yet to even comprehend all of it. But they gave us a chart that I can't put my hands on, and it showed those 5 quarters, exactly what they are, and which counties had already imposed them. Like, I think we have 3 of them here in Cache County, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think we do have 3.
But I'd like to see what the other 2 are, how they're specified, like if it's something as we're looking at needs for revenue, could we look at those? What are the stipulations on what they're used for, if that revenue is generated? You know what I mean? Would that be something that would be useful for us as a council to just have that chart laid out? It was really well done, and I can't remember what I did with mine.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I know we kind of, in the last road advisory committee, Jeff with CMPO was there, and we kind of looked at that, and he has another chart that says, here's what they are. The one you had listed which counties had enacted what of those taxes, but also the one that Jeff has kind of also spells out how they can be used, because some options, it depends on the class of county you are, and as well, you either get option A or you get option B in that quarter. So again, I think that it's kind of a bigger discussion, maybe another workshop or something if the county council wants more knowledge. And I know, not to put Jeff on the spot, but I'm sure anyone that wants to meet with Jeff, he'd be more than willing to walk through and explain what those are. So, and I know as well, from the time we met at Building Utah, I still have my sheet, and I was looking at that. There's a number of communities that have, a lot more communities have started implementing these 0.25% sales tax options. So again, this is a kind of an option that the state legislature is giving the different communities to, here's your resources, giving us the option to implement them, use them in our own counties before we have to go to kind of the state and say, hey, we want more money for this. They might come back and say, have you used the tools and resources we've given you? And again, I think this individual 0.25% shows, right, $65 million is a lot. At first, that was $200,000 a month. Now we're collecting over $500,000 every month through this. So just a little bit from everybody, but it's created a lot of good transportation projects for our citizens and within the county.
That would be helpful for me. I'm newer. Maybe these guys already know all that.
Sandy, I apologize. We did have a very good discussion in the road advisory committee meeting. So we probably need to, get with you and Mark and some of the other ones that weren't at that meeting and have kind of the same thing, sit down with Jeff and give you guys, so if there's an opportunity, we're happy to come with you and bring Jeff along so he can answer the historic questions of that, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I know we're getting close to.
I'm sorry I'm late, but on those extra little 0.25%, those taxes as they come along, I wish they just weren't encumbered certain ways. If we could basically just say, hey, this is where we need it, rather than this is where you have to put this and this is percentage. I wish we just had some latitude.
And I think there's one that gives you that latitude.
The second quarter, you just have to put in a resolution how you intend to use them between roadways and transit. You just have to say to the voters how you're going to use it. It gives you pretty much, and they've made it more flexible in the eligible types of projects you can do. It used to be there was a lot more constraint, but now any transportation project, transit, active transportation, roadway, maintenance.
And that's the one that we need to enact before we're able to get other kind of monies from the state.
Well, technically, no, but the challenge is that when we try to chase other monies for the state,
They say, have
particularly
you utilized
legislators
this?
that
Yeah.
know about these local
Yeah.
options. One of the first questions they ask is, well, have you done this? Have you implemented that? And inherent in that is, why are you coming to me when you haven't implemented the tools we gave you? Now, it's always easy to get, taxes are hard to implement, so it's always easy to get them to fund it, but that's a question that is being asked more often as we pursue these statewide funds from legislators.
Any other questions? Okay. maybe, not that we need a vote, but do you feel like we're headed in the right direction? Do we have support from the council on what you've heard today?
I think it's a good move.
I do too. I like the amendments, so thank you.
Having been on the city side of the COG
Yeah.
experience and then this perspective, I think the transition is a great move.
Yeah.
Help cities be able to get projects off the ground, but also encourage planning ahead. I think it's a great move.
Okay, no, again, we kind of wanted that general buy-in now versus showing up October and going, hey, we didn't know this was coming, and run into other issues. So again, if there's no other questions, thank you very much for your time. We know this is kind of outside your regular council meeting time, but we appreciate the time to come and present to you and help you kind of know what the COG's up to and what we're looking forward to. So thank you.
Thanks for all you guys do.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse, and thank you, mayors. Jeff, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Isaac, thank you.
The CMPO has doubled our size, and now
Okay, very good. Thank you again.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Matt.
guys.